Also, like definitely my particular inspiration right now, like season three, trying to take the own self, but like to see this wrong machine and trying to and like not report that different, but definitely this might be something that may be taken place in that yeah, I know it's definitely my particular option. So that what they might be attempting right now might see to that open up that the gates to like the panel that my particular, especially I'm different that by now that the English might have you about front of and it's I'm available about the here in not available so my full impression where that crucial information about front of experiments operating in that case in open in unavailable place of that front of that information might be something that front of might have not even uh, kept the secret even from the person so definitely my person because of that since I think that front of had this sales of production focus to hand over relevant as was ultimate person sometimes different what might have changed the trajectory of from the experiment might have been the point might have been at the point where as part of final experiment of 11 which runner might have made 11 to might have been definitely that whole part of kind of experimental acts of the dark. So that run of proves that fast that experience I'm looking finally when it came to 11th case I'm looking what uh, runner the first experiment that runner might have made 11 day might have been two for 11 to game ability of telepathic power definitely vertical right 11 without being created at all 11 might have been able to quickly gain those powers and he might have been on the hand being able to handle it after might have been what might have happened is definitely more able to emotion that's runner might have uh, uh, done experiment to make 11 gain in the telekinesis power that as well learn might have to be being able to attain that power as well. You might have been able to say definitely 11 might have been super impressive the practice of where I'm looking in the case of Cali as well as the remaining 10 experience of one of which one of the gate of the considering failure. I'm going to bring career that will might have been one of the definitely also need to career. So so all of them it might have been a scenario where the attempt to make the runner might have said how Cali has unique power for the hallucination power runner they might have made uh, might have attempted to as for the remaining 10 experiments of subject of friends might have attempted to make them learn all sorts of just unique make them attain all these unique kind of all these techniques might have range of but might have been the telekinetic power alone that might have remained common among those powers as well as the power to be able to access the dark world as well might be of the highest priority for another experience it's just might have been the case that we might have been was trying to create that ultimate level and some I know what state that on different that leads to for that weapon to have the power of to be able to defeat anyone mind using the ability power as well as the power of pelican to launch attack as well as the power to locate the enemy forces used by entering into the dark world. So this might be one one of might have been especially the pelican power as well as the power to be able to locate anyone to use actively the dark web. These two might be the top priority of the power that thing one of the experiment that one might have one of because or 10 experience subjects to be able to attain and be certainly able to be able to but for regardless I'm looking it might have been only 11 that might have been able to successfully not only the telekinesis power but uh, uh, might have been able to handle and learn not only the and quickly not only the telekinesis powers as well as the power to access the language and get anyone but also the power of the telepathy aspect so that might have been super impressive the result of the experiment when it came to 11 and that way might have that particular element as just final sort of experience that we might have been and I'm really putting things 11 is sort of runner actually understand runners cycle to undergoing even career as well might have been that female scientist in in metal the past is the highest side like certainly metal side. So that way that way 11 IQ might that fast that you don't run around with. which might have made it possible for like 11 to be able to like handle all these powers, and basically maybe that made it out 11 lack of experience. 11 might have been like a good learner and might have 11 experience might have ended up so like I'm like once like and I'm looking like pronounce plan might have been one like if like the most important extent of which to pronounce might have been good for like 11 to be able to like attain like the cost to be able to like actually set the wrong way. Like I'm looking that once that was like a service like I'm looking like from that point might have been when like might have totally gotten five right because like since like because we will reveal that like the times that 11 has had to for that word uh, that takes it most of similar to most of and basically sold up towards like 11 index that upward and tries to like communicate together. So like at that point might be when like Bernard might have only got on five like from this like initial intelligence it might have been 2 lakh, 1 lakh, 11 lakh to be able to like have this like match like 11 managed to like have this like the backward communication power like then at that point so like perfect in like the very next step itself to basically hand over 11 to like the question might have been run like plan initial plans that we might have framed it. But like it might have been that 11 like simply seems that in that case it's more of things that the last word that might have changed the thought and might have that the hero still yeah or might have increased to a great extent of that thought and it might be some setbacks that like might have made a fight and might have wanted to like find out what that monster box that like where it came from, how did that monster box agent showed up into that the dark web and all that might have been what might have happened. Definitely not going to ready from so how can simple like has for the reason like the half had been really good at listen to like getting like sound of that monster in that combination of the so like that might have been all part of that with the sleep of one of it might have gone on 5 so definitely for like the like for like the person post like on the different it might have been totally about like they might have been getting impatient with that or not delivering like that one, you know, it's definitely my different things. So like in that just like so like I'm providing like the person like person might be also thinking that like I don't know has totally got eliminated that leak might have been also. So that at least this is the my very question that like rate carrot might not have been one thing like that on a like alive on a in a certain might still be alive. And I'm not thinking that we probably have a secret base in like the parallel world and might have that whole that random lamp of that like will have things in like Halloween might from like the real world. Uh, while will have changed like the parallel from the real world that set of lamp would be like in like the parallel during that the paper like nothing certainly but the from the thing. Yeah. And I'm thinking also yeah like the fact that like alive might be totally something that like the Muslim folks might be totally unaware of because we might go through this. So like that them you know getting their weapon like and the Muslim folks might be also saying that like even even has been been eliminated. That will be like a impression. So like the Muslim folks so that might have got extremely angry and they said that like then they might have decided to like make to get that information folks might have also brought us to a certain extent of like any information as to that as to that 11 opening like the gate within that the of that before 11 had sort of eliminated that the things that happened in the next of the laboratory of that 11 opening the gate within like the laboratory. So I'm like consider that so that how that might have happened after different like that might have been like in like the very beginning of like the scientist that was in that had to be initially sort of captured by like the inner taking so like that might have been the one of like the scientists at like the laboratory that then might have been might have totally deprived and might have seen away during this like night shift at the laboratory. He might have totally left 11 out of that 11 scope and he might have wanted to like see he might have been out with curious as to like the full scope extent of that 11 like telekinesis power. So like everything like so what might happen would be like that science might have secretly like let out 11 and might have scope 11 to that totally use 11 like direct 11 like say for cause to a specific area to the next another laboratory where like and to that for 11 to that so that the full extent of that the maximum extent of that elements like telekinesis power the scientists might have ordered that to like 11 and during things back then like 11 had absolutely no combat to like the outside world like in that 11 or 11 might have like straight away other might have been what might have happened with the range so the 11 might have let out forms of telekinesis power to that specific area uh, within that kind of the laboratory, and that way it might have been an accidental scenario that say like the maximum level of power supply and that might have resulted in that whole wall within the kind of the laboratory that of on the maximum of level principles landing on that resulting in that maybe that uh the industry of maybe like the industry of picture on how things like this was holding up and they believe in that fair like it was opening up between like the real world and like the family good and that they opening up within that we love it that that not might have happened to it like an accident might be like the date that we were putting the temperature so that this might have been what when you might be very temperature right now. So like the lead my vegetarian restaurant right now as like what might be happening like a percent of the like tools and like machine as well as like all these like kind of and military like I'm specifically my vegetarian restaurant that like, it might be like there are things that they might be talking doing that like go for up as well as like there is had got eliminated like and so that person might be like a thing right now that like, they won't be able to like get their level so that I think like still the information about like a lot of things that might have happened in like the level for a long and like the element forming of the gate that something that might have is like to be a the question point. So like I'm point that they find out like the sense that certain folks might be actually trying right now might be through that mistake that they might be actually trying to hold up that maybe that in the town where like or like cities where people like in that Russia might do that hold up that in the people that town within that the real world and make the bad world and using that machine and basically create a fair to create like they might be attempting to like create a case within their level with exactly like how 11 has created within like level level. It might be one like these that also question process and like it might be like attempting. So like I'm bring that whole machine to that I'm using that machine level from then of the trying to that bring that something that once that experiment will be starting I'm going to scenario to be that a huge deep like being sent out of that huge mission and that landing into that wall area and basically that's resulting in that place maybe that in that town or entity where that lab will be that getting folded up and at that point I'm just so that I'm considering maybe like searching so it's my doubt don't have hands on like one on one thing that means the experiments of that or not like I'm looking at one of those projects that have to be like might outfall into like the hand sublet version by now is the implement information. So like that individual might have got some this other and might have and I'm looking right now in this like current experiment I'm looking that individual that another among like the first 10 that end up going for another like another individual amount of that basically right now being surveyed I'm looking and I'm looking right now for like that person to be like right now to be and basically right now I'm looking like that giant machine that shooting console reflectively onto that the wall and and that way the coding happening in that school. And at that point the computer like according to like the order from the code that computer that individual like using that individuals like infinite powers and basically creating and opening up that a gate within that lab. There's like the scenario that I'm talking about. Okay, so lab I think it's like a famous instrument that I'm looking at since I was very ambitious for like that individual being like a famous instrument of like I'm saying maybe that individuals like intelligence powers might not be nowhere near as strong as like the rest of that intelligence power as that of that uh, element of carry that lead my to the like due to those reason I'm looking at those that you see my job is so like luckily my considering production right now is for like and around machine that sitting on center that output enough to be to like a wall and they have to put that at that point that according to like the owners of it suppose that individual that just using that individual that continuous power that intensifying like the magnitude of that cannot be and that putting in that the opening up within that kind of will have a big level of scenario that I'm so that Liam was showing that that individual, even though that individual might have clinical powers, like still that like I'm looking suppose they are like infection might during my see the scenario being that maybe then that thing that basically let them maybe thing that basically to take advantage of that possibility of lack of integrate and understand that uh, they don't be appearing that the possibility of that strike line on the right so like I'm looking like from their point of view, they might be thinking of like maybe opening up the gate and basically the possibility of like safely maybe that so that gate opening that gate like them finding like even more superior weapons on the other side and like the barrel board. It will be around the line from like uh those forces will be thinking. Since like according to my super interesting right now, especially preparing for like another gate right now, getting open. And when that lab just might be in like Russia, definitely preparing that the moment that gate will be getting open, like I'm saying that the thousand created at all like completely underway, completely new type of that kind of spaces you know, or like shadow and so on. That's what I'm also trying to be emerging out of that gate and will be straight away attacking that find the plan like suppose in that lab is like the scenario parameter. So like I'm looking for me two possibilities either like a totally different kind of like basis model since like that are like basis models of the like the humanoid basis model of what's the field so far like maybe one possibility for like a totally different kind of like shape is like that. Or like I'm doing that a totally different kind of like shadow method which might be like the size of like shadow method of like the size of like the humanoid face of model what are the different. So like it will be like one of these two possibilities that I'm basically correct. So for like only never the boxing and there's kind of like a new kind of national cup right now emerging into that lab, especially my personal image. Since that's according to my personal impression, so I think that lab might actually be in that Russia, in that the world of the kind of things. So like I'm going to bring actually so if that gate opening would be from that the opening of the gate would be still that's a bad word I'm going to bring something and that totally different. So since it's like a totally the gate opening at like a totally different location towards like the barrier is what I'm looking. So like at that point, like in that exact around that exact location in like the Balboa, like since like the Balboa will be like totally dominated by only that different kind of like monster competition, like that area being like the country of this unique kind of like monster in like the Balboa. So like that way that once like right now the state will be open, that kind of thing, that unique kind of that monsters what I'm looking that integrating into that lab which might be in that connection might like into secondary interesting right. Okay, so that's nothing which might be very important right now for lab. Within that lab, you might be looking at the lab since it's like not even failed experiments of that lab using the sort of to like open up that gate, but like recently being like really opened solely by like this huge uh than like machine like I'm looking for interview. So like even while like the professor of class like anything like if you're the teacher of the science teacher of like microbiome doesn't and also being already revealed that like that level of energy to that open up that the support of that between like the failure and parallel and basically to open up the gate that then that level of energy required to that from this that for reading for like uh again like for like humans like basically so that can maybe that the kind of thing that that lab might have figured out that methodology out the box that solution to harnessing such extreme superior levels of like energy and into the selection machine. And that might be how that is done right now without even any help from that any of that compared experience of that server like then by solely relying on a machine and without any telekinetic power to do like that by solely relying on the slack energy that kind of like a being shooting machine alone that then managing to like top not like to like the power. It's definitely my personal example. So that is might be through such a unique kind of like a solution which like not even Professor Cloud might have never even thought of that. Such a solution that I'm going to find it like possibly maybe in that Russia might have figured out and might be solution right now. So that's definitely a sustainable manufacturing question for example, different two purposes that the intent and the reason, especially because of the purpose of like the military forces there, like the intent behind like, the opening of like the gate that we trying would be here to before like different for like before the like the military forces like needing that superior weapon from like trying to like sustain it and into with the bad one and trying to like sustain that new superior kind of like weapon system to my with so that I'm just trying to talk with either like the military force they are like might have totally like found out about like the basic monster six composites which monster six system in like the bad work. So like they are that might be to like use like to find this to like only to first like affect one of like one basic monster from like to make this monster from like the bad work and then for them to like totally experiment on like following science to like totally experiment on like the basic monsters to literally have it take comments from like the and to have it like take comments on like the nature of it and that way for them to like use those basic monsters as like um the weapon. It's definitely might be like the intent behind and the reason behind that the gate working right now. Might be the gate definitely one possibility that the other possibility that I'm looking for like maybe that this military force and the kind is that this military force that only having the knowledge about like the right thing that the party got at that Pranav lab that the gate Pranav having opened up the gate to the party that may be like the only knowledge they might have, like they might have absolutely no idea about like the existence of like the basic knowledge. So like I don't think that's the case, then that's like the other possibility that I'm looking for. If that's the case, then like correction for also might be only hoping that like in like the parallel world that maybe for like the technology probably being far advanced we don't say that like, they might be planning on like the, going up to the parallel world and they will feeling like the highly advanced like technology and many lab the one that itself might be like someone can machine from the history like from the developers might be that the possibility. Other possibility of course like why that these military forces maybe right now trying to like open the building. The intent behind that group so that lead might wasn't there is okay, so like the police might wasn't there and right now as the land that military generally giving just one year of that scientists like and to bring the team that the actuality of that threat would be like not only that the elimination of that science alone, but like if it fails to that property within 1 year, but also something that it might be also the threat of like even definitely that scientist would get only having a family, so that there will be that threat of like basically of that this one the family that's that the league might be representing that force push up to like open up the fully open up the gate within 1 year that like putting resulting in that kind of like an episode of created at all that one business him probably traveling on the way and showing up to like the town of interest that scenario is like definitely because definitely since like they're trying to like in that lab in that Russia since they are trying to like open up the gate exactly like in like burners like another level definitely something so that they might have be aware of that too. They might have knowledge to a certain extent of that about that. The things that a lot of things that have happened in that not really about for example, definitely my personal impression coming into that the opening of the gate and all. Definitely my personal impression. So like definitely to figure out how exactly that Pranav did it. That because like definitely just scientists like they don't think that they go Pranav by themselves that might have that through his like influence of like 11 like he might have been a scenario in which like ordering 11 to like open up the gate and like that way opening up the gate might have been what might have happened to be along the lines to the scientists might be dealing more what of me my preparation when in actuality my particular impression that like that 11 opening like the gate might have been a sheer accident like uh, caused by like the betrayal of like one of like perhaps like a scientist member that need might without perhaps knowledge that science member like simply that the ordering element to like unleash all like like about that during that point and that actually creating that second within that turn of the level of trans might have been what might have happened. That lead might have been very definitely yeah like the science is a bit of the thing that like it was all runners trains and like runners consciously like opening up like 11 might have been what might have happened. They along the lines the science might be still even though the things definitely might wasn't there. Yet like the science will be also for the would be also believe that like what run up as well as that 11 is like no more. So definitely the current like still the science only going up to like the town of Hawkins to like only so that has to intent that like we might get to and so since like program has like the theater in that opening like the gate would be along the line to would be things so like even though Pranav got eliminated like still like from like the remaining team members of like Pranav's cage or like to like the current person that will be like engaged like not been about it right now even though he might be aware for like the gate having been closed and basically all that like definitely my book realization. So in like the kind of developer kind of definitely my book realization. So get like I'm like don't be showing up to like the town find showing up to like town talking to that absolute in that and I'm going to like to sort of interrogate like the remaining team members of like run up and to like get the information out of them. This interrogation as to like how run up they did that how he was able to like open up the gate as for like the details and the information as for like the exact experiments that like Pranav has done on 11 and as to like how the information about the like as to like how Pranav like did those experiments or the complete detail of that like to interrogate like the remaining survivors of like Pranav's like team might be with such an intent like I'm saying maybe to gain such a knowledge for the specific scientist to like really copying that like through that knowledge like even though he even to the person who be believing that like even is no more like to bit only thing that maybe people gaining that knowledge that we might be able to like make corrections to his like machine and that way to his like giant machine and that way through that knowledge actually that way he might be able to like open up like the gates in like the lab in like Russia within a year, or like he might be targeting an organizer that will be to through interrogation of that remaining team members and for like the experience runner has done on just like several subjects and has like how executed all those like experience and by getting all that features for like to that totally the very same attempt the very same experiment on like individual students and that possibly for that way for things to be able to like create its own lab and individual with like subject individual with like gaining superpowers and basically intelligence powers and skills such a manner that for him to be able to like use that individual to like open the gate would be like select other positive plan and what or like what would find might be planning to like how to like execute like the opening of the gate like the lab in conscious definitely might be there. So definitely not good for that way like it's showing up to that topic and not the level but like I'm looking at it won't be just involved in the like or I'm looking at how the bring to kind of security focus that definitely might be in the range. So and other point then all will be like according to that their strategy like I'm them all showing up in that as well disguise as like news reporters definitely might be surrounded. So like as elected guys of like news reporters like showing up to like the Hawkinsmall laboratory to that question to like the scientists at like the Hawkins Energy Laboratory and that way that this would be also planning on like the scientific and that way to like that would be to like also that way for like the lab as well that way like observing project friends to like observe everything within like the lab and to see if like people like study that obtain that maybe valuable information from like the lab or through like the that's been asking questions like when do we have a photo in like the energy laboratory or like plan might be to like figure out to like running that energy laboratory in like the person who's like in charge of like the energy laboratory after like burn of like elimination will be along the line waiting for the thing so like to find out who that is and basically that to like secretly interrogate that person like that's like currently in charge of like the energy laboratory and physically interrogate him and maybe possibly get like the valuable information out of like how someone might have done it like maybe like him knowing that will be like along the line the scientist might be seeing like the possibility of the league might be the same so like during that whole while under the scenario to be that finding develop memory process like that in there but guys like I think for the going up to like the lab and then finding out that like it's Owens that's like currently in charge of the penalty laboratory and then like and then and during that time I'm like Owens might not be looking in like the lab that and during that time like I'm looking like to like from the operator like Owens might be at that point you know in that the lab but like might have head off to that home in that home is definitely necessary. So like at that point, I'm looking at the find as well as like segregate for like the is guys like showing up to like phone in like talking they are like going to be all like himself, especially my computer. So like they are like I'm just like them taking out like their misguides and I'm just like them probably threatening to eliminate phone and like own family, which own family might not be in that problem, but still own family to be able to so like it's like them threatening phone doing that for his family and in terms of well. And still, I'm looking for like even at that point, like I'm looking like going that looking for like only still lying to them about like things not knowing anything and all that scenario that I'm looking for. So that way, like I'm looking like eventually the scenario being that them at that point totally noticing this that photo that would be at that phone with that phone in like topic. So like there I'm remembering that there are keeping a photo of like Will, and like that photo might have been on the day when Will had it is like a snowball and definitely up like everyone closing the gate and everything while like they were all celebrating and like while Will had this like snowball and like and like that picture which like Jonathan since I think like Johnson was taking pictures like the snowball building location like I'm remembering like during the times like Jonathan might have totally like totally joyfully taken the photo of like Will dancing. So definitely my considerable. So like I'm remembering that by like extremely unlucky manner like I'm like 11 and my 11 and might have totally got towards like the phone of that photo. Definitely my consideration. Leaning more towards the maybe it's not even being my like being 11 alone, that coincidentally by sheer unlucky manner, like I'm like even might have gotten caught in like the corner of like that back of like that photo where like where like that photo that Jonathan might have taken might have been that of that Will dance that so like I'm looking like even Jonathan might have not like realized that like usually of that element getting caught in that corner of like that photo that he might have been image. So like I'm looking at that photo I'm looking at like when he might have kept in at his like home and once as well might have not carefully stared into like that photo and noticed like element in the corner of that photo of that Will's dance during that snowfall, especially Michael Injury and also. So that Owens even keeping that photo of Will might be solely due to that Owens like solely being so happy and proud of himself for like taking the right decision, which would be like what Owens would have felt that basically of like basically him being part of that taking the right steps and like that as well having played a role in that basically him being part of that the things that Popper and Orson had did, which actually ended up the fact that like he had like totally helped out like Hopper and all of them back during like the energy level, which is also allowed them to even though like Bob and Robin Killinger did all that effort that like and it's the right decision that like during that critical situation that like one had taken like, that all had like played the fact in like the will that in that will getting saved as well as like definitely and free from like, the control of like, the shadow mentor as well as like also be also so, like very proud about like information. Right away, while back then like while all the remaining scientists had pressured like Owens to like totally put will through some sort of like an experiment to save them uh, from like the great spreading of like the carbon and like shadow of the fact that like even at that point like Owens totally like worked against like the decision of his own science team and on prioritizing that will safety and all that works definitely and with like will be something that Owens to be totally the person will would be like someone that wants to be seeing with that absolute joyful and like a proud feeling that basically that will like the fact that will like totally safe and found in like the person like definitely the that having like Owen's taking the right decision have it's like one of like the parts that have played a role in like basically being able to be safe and free from like the control of like the shadow about the definitely would be along the lines like on to the for the feeling so like I'm like definitely on that way might have had like a photo of that very because of all the reason I'm moving like things might have had like a photo might have gotten like a photo and maybe by phone might have like casually that after like the snowball dance like I'm looking like one day like phones might have casually paid a visit to that to like the form of will actually will enjoy and so like I'm looking like during that time like I'm looking like might have paid a visit to like tell them that he's like sorry uh for like being part of like the with and everything it's definitely my documentary and to like keep that throat hidden from like doing for so long about like being depressed and everything. Definitely my documentary number so it might have been like a phone showing up like a portrait to them and it might be at that point that like you might have seen like the photos of like that John Continental data of like Vince Dam and like his snowball. Definitely my first friend. So like I'm the one that might have asked that so if that we could have that photo of Will and like George might have straight away that George might have already told him like sure like we can have it like how about your platform but he says like Jonathan and Will all of them might have it in the second might taking to them but like all of them might have totally in this like element in that corner of that photo definitely might be considered so like so like I'm putting that day like during I'm looking the scenario is for like the scientist from like the lab and what's like going up to like Hawkins and like Jack Bacon going up towards like Owens to like interrogate Owens like I'm looking like Owen like only like still lying to no matter the threats like on still lying to him and like on being prepared to like keep like the secret about like 11 on the way to this like and about like the opening of like the gate and like how done that and all that like even to like to keep it like the secret even to this like last but like once you believe it but like I'm only people at that point that I'm just like maybe either for signed or like most likely I'm referring to be like the security force that might be like interrogating ones at that point. But like I'm referring that it might be at that point that like the scientist might at that point would be like noticing that photo that might be in like a frame kind of like state in like something that happened. So like in noticing that photo totally clicking at that photo I think shockingly noticing that element at that form of like that photo and like even might be in that a tiny bit of extent to that in like a blur kind of a state as well to like just a tiny extent as well as like even only in that corner of that depot. So like considering that way at that point like that kind of like only recognizing 11 at that point like the scenario that I was so like at that point itself in that kind of asking points as to like where after that 11 and basically like that kind of like still like we think that the that as well the secret and basically at that point points like within that as well as secret at that point and then like at that point like that that security code that kind of network is getting negative influence at that point is like the scenario that I'm referring. That way like I'm then decided things to like that has been discussed that kind of as well as like the black security code is like deciding to like search and form that so that also self that search and form like the entire thing of that pocket until they find like is like the and this like the situation that I'm something for like the scenario that I'm looking for this and my question very untouched. Again, so like definitely my very question right now as well like my focus matching and when like right now watching into this like more like like they might be able to watch the movie and I'm just looking like Nancy's words about like Dustin, how Nancy felt about Dustin that I'm looking at might have in a single year itself might have ended up becoming a reality. It's definitely like open ended. So definitely even while I'm considering definitely so in like the present like I'm doing that even while I'm considering Dustin might not have a girlfriend like I'm still like the situation might be such that it will wear a lot much impose like I'm looking at girls will be totally touching on us. So like might be the whole situation of like Dustin certainly might be very much. Always like I'm looking at because might be probably jealous of especially might be very so uh definitely like and that is what I'm projecting like in the scenario to be like as like so like it might have been something that might have showed up to like the mark and not for like not even for like the movies but like even though Dustin might have opened that like that they can watch movies together like I'm still like that might have been the case for like I'm still it might have been something that might have gone up to like the mark they before like even because of it or even like in Japanese might have like and I'm to bring like that way like Dustin might have sort of early and like already by now said that Dustin might be having like a bunch of girls like hanging out with like Dustin by totally falling for myself like scenario that I was so like that is what I'm referring like as like the way of like my with the and my kid will be making it to like verification of like fear within that mall like I'm putting like that is what I'm totally putting them to like totally see like Dustin hang out with like a bunch of your would be like really Russian and the things like scenario that I'm going to and my portfolio consistent right now. I guess so like definitely my consideration function right now as well, like except for 11 lakh with that Dustin alone like missing from that again as like they're about to work with the movie and definitely I think that like Dustin might not only like to like might represent all of them about like him not being able to like make it through like the movie, but naturally like what Dustin might have been like Dustin might not only sort of early and might also he's been through like through once again through like Steve's help like Dustin might also he's been through like the theater and like the snap wells will be present in that very same theater that like Mike Lucas and all of them are watching this movie movie and it's definitely my but like none of them will be aware of that Dustin but like I'm saying naturally like Dustin might be sitting on all the way back to like the back end of like the theater and I'm going to be Dustin and like it will be like a bunch of ladies like sitting on both sides of like stuff. Should all be like having should all be like having that and Dustin definitely my vegetarian. So like I'm going like it being only once like the so like I'm definitely going to be only one like the movie will be over and like Lucas or like Mike will be saying that like that they would understand at that point like conflict movie will be over like them so we think that that they are like totally missing the still, yeah, then saying that and like them getting up and like basically by then like the lights would be turned on to like as they will be getting up and like turning around like on the first that getting like that biggest shock to like them seeing like Dustin like basically uh the black bunch of people they in like all those food like next to like Dustin in like the back and basically it's like a scenario that I'm going to so that have to bring that way, like I'm looking like because at that point getting to jealous of like the Dustin and like all just Dustin like a show off and all that like doing an art that so like when like the movie will be over like I'm doing like Dustin totally saying goodbye to like the ladies and everything like Dustin like at that point would be when like Dustin will be hanging out with, like again with like my and my kid and so this like doing the scenario that I'm looking at and my computer is interesting right Okay, so like definitely my impression right now as for like the entirety of that model like will be having like seven or page like considering like it definitely won't be at all having any sort of connection to like the password or like any of like the monsters of like service or the password or eventually like the shadow monster at all. It's definitely my considering that it might be definitely I'm assuming like something going wrong with like the generator might be like something which is definitely my considering interest. So like I'm assuming like without created at all like the power and that and basically that then continues with the negative action scenario that I'm replace of also the my person to render that like even after like a full the halfing things like that snowboard that doing like Mike and the when like the shadow of from like the battle board was like right they are exactly like the battle board. The big and that as well might have definitely be like the shadow of is wanting element that wanting to like take control of element it was definitely and the shadow monster only also feeling at that point that like it was like an absolute mistake for that probably take control over Quinn but like the shadow monster should have taken control of 11 so that like the shadow monster by taking control of 11 would be able to like usually open up many landscape to like from like the Bible to like the real world as like almost the shadow monster world would be along the lines like the shadow monster would have felt so like a friend at least then actually that whole since like even after like a whole year passing that even to like the person like the since like in like the person like 11 right now at like Hopper's home and that's super even to like the person like that giant shadow monster would be exactly as like celebration like Hopper's home in like the battle boy definitely Michael still like standing right there in like the battle boy still like totally patiently waiting for like 11 patiently waiting and hoping for like 11 to like make some sort of like a mistake with like 11 to like teleconnect to the power and to like certain like 11 actually opening up um actually opening up to be from like the real world right? And to like the parallel world. Maybe were like I'm different that the shadow monster might have been facing it in the update of the whole yeah might be probably still would be like talking to them into like someday. Might be the actuality of the situation. That's definitely my injury. Okay, so like definitely my injury and right now. So like what appears to be like the entirety of like the town of it like having like that power of face starting with like the not only like that small but like maybe in like the stuff here from this like my camera was in like some I'm definitely something like that definitely might not be at all. It's your coincidence at all. It's definitely my injury embarrassing right now. So like I'm the since like with like the time period of like 1 year passing that that I'm the has a lot of relevance. That as well as like that uh, in that lab that general that general that will be running uh, that that kind of I'm giving exactly 1 year of well to like complete this like experiment of like opening activity as well. But for that these two will be open that I come to certainly my position and so that as to how these two uh think about like a whole year passing the key connected and the difference might have been that since that present by that military general like and that scientist might have maybe that might have randomly fairly search for a way to like open up the gate for like the entirety of like the past year and myself in part of like making all sorts of like improvements to the like giant machine and repeatedly trying to like open up the gate but like instead of in a time that even though maybe like slight improvements might have been happening and still like the experiment to like the open like the gate might have been ended up particularly ended up becoming the favorite definitely my personal temperature. So like I'm thinking like maybe it might have been actually around like the and I was thinking it might have been eventually one like during like the exact day like 352 like might have been on that. So like I'm right now pretty like that day were like my and like these were like I think that my friend enough communicated to 11 team that of the 350 back at like the past like I'm looking like actually that Pranapa British maybe has one more people were like in like the past year after giving that threatening of that threat of that after that scientist having gotten the threat of that having that opened the gate within a year like it might have been on like the 350 second day that like that scientist might have finally succeeded in that opening the gate and I'm like it might have moved not to he might have not opened the gate through just like machine might not be like it is limited relevant. So like I'm like our exactly best scientist might have managed to like open the case and the correct might have been through Cali, which definitely might have been the end. So like I'm thinking maybe Cali might have come back towards like the end of that single year, like I'm thinking that Cali might have only got affected by the by the forces of like this by the security forces of like that kind compared to that and might have been what might have happened. So like that kind of preferring like might have bottom like the information, especially uh scanning like perfectly and also up like Robert Gang like creating Robert like particularly on the like very carry like name that like carry might have that can photo might have appeared on like the news specifically might have been the impression. So like I'm doing that way. But like I'm doing that it might have never been in that thing like the town of popping but like so to the carry and fill up then from again arrange like on the that I think in noise like if they are like I'm thinking like the new chance like actually carry as well as the Robert Games like identity might have gotten found out by like the police might have been what might have happened and justice might have been gotten found on the news in that to be like in the area that the also the noise might have been what might have happened. So that way I'm going to bring that I'm going to bring that way that Cali space like I'm definitely putting that in that list of from a way experiment language like I'm putting maybe that kind of might have by then got hands on like able to connect that the name Cali might have been present. It's definitely my good reaction. So definitely I'm going to name someone that the remaining the remaining survivors of like from a team that I'm looking that one of them might have noticed like Cali's name and I'm looking that even before that I'm looking that with like the repeated attempts of like 10 scientists like experiments from like the past year like autism ended up becoming the failure. Who might have in the past year might have even showed up to autism might have first around and people might have interacted with like the neighborhood like now maybe trying to like find out about like maybe like the whereabouts of like the remaining failure experiments of like one of while then or to the internet even handling that in it. So like might have been phones alone that might be like in like that and of the land that it might have been phones alone that might that like element like that might be like influence so like I'm doing that kind of as well as like the security also might have showed up and like in the occasion or like maybe somehow they might have through that interaction with like the remaining team members of join us like in like concentration like you might have only asked them about like they can only bonding one of it ask them about like where about the of like the failure estimate of like and basically like who might have even offered them like through some of marketing exchange for like if they get some like the whereabouts of like the Twitter experiment of the number and like what might have happened in like the past 1 year. So like I'm doing that so that means like that one of that the remaining team members of that run might have been during that time might have been at that maybe mind of the area also. So when is showing like the table carry like and the that actually we might have that and like the name carry that might have been joined like so that will like that scientist might have recognized that like carry and that in the straight away from that scientist in like Russia and that might have told us about like finding that something procedure and that way that scientist comes that as well as around that the people might have once again showed up from that Russia like they might have contacted carry that lead what might have happened with the might have they might have affected carry, but they might have found carry and they might have affected, they might have managed to like affect carry by threatening to eliminate that carry black propaganda. So like things like after like splitting up from 11 like that propaganda might have been like the only people that carry might have had not life back and look at that when like basically like that when it might have threatened to like eliminate the if like carry without any resistance like comes along with that way like and then they might have found carry all the way to like Russia maybe put that was scenario that way like they might have from that lab in that Russia like something like they might have totally totally made like carry a few of superpowers that might have that way opened up like pretty might have the reimbursement for like what might have like the shadow of the done for like the past in the year like the year might have been like the shadow of the might have been preparing for like it's like it's like ultimate strategy plan. He like once again open a strategy and yeah for like the shadow monster might have done might have been the shadow monster might have totally maybe foreseen like the possibility of that basically of like maybe there are being other case and for like the world and like the battle zone. So if like the shadow monster might not be aware of that. Along the line the shadow monster might have also like and what the shadow monster might have done for like the past whole year might have been like the shadow monster might have controlled that so like the shadow mixer might have created controlled and created like a huge army. And then that huge army of like taking monsters like humanoid monsters and might have given them that command to like spread across and travel across and like spread across like that vendability of like the parallel might have been what might have left or of that might have given, and that way like this great number of basis models might have traveled across like the parallel definitely might have been understand since like the shadow also have like the control over like the basis model. So like at that time what might have happened might have been that might have been that like everything was the great army of like similar basis model full of like the top like model doesn't might be okay. All these models are like the control of like the shadow model might have been what might have happened during the area. So like and look like that everything has been all this great number of models might have friend of course like the patterns like going to like the order of the patterns. So like at that point everything like these basis models might be seeing and feeling across like the world like the shadow models of people seeing and feeling definitely might be very emerging. So like I'm looking like once like using carrying that scientific might have opened like the gate from like the lab and but like while we might have opened like the gates to like the parallel like in the like so like my person the impressions that like maybe that the thing what might have happened that might have been that after like carry might have opened like the gate in that the lab in that Russia like basically like first that military forces and that along with that carry might have that then also might have ordered carry to that basically entering the like the into like that word and they might have started like exploring like the bad word and their intent might be to like other either cash like this amount of and they do have like the sense to experiment on them to like turn them into that weapons that they're taking out of from that those military force might have made like person the intent is that the one possible things that are doing. But again like they might have for like the bad words at that point along with that carrying might have been at that point also seeing like the bad words so like what's kind bukan like dan like yang gua masih ke Facebook dan ke kantor like the control like the shadow motor might have the film the man so like at that point like the shadow motor might have run towards them and at that point that Charlie might have be used for superpower to like stop like that Facebook motor. So like that might have been a bunch of Facebook motor. So like at that point under the point that the belief was Facebook motors like that was group of like Facebook motors after like the control which might have been under control of the shadow motor like they might have created eliminated all those like for those like security purposes and I'm looking like those like seeing like can use the using like sort of like I'm looking like pretty similar to that of like even at that point because I'm looking like the shadow month of might have realized that maybe that like the finally like the shadow month of right now at that point might have realized like shadow month of like opportunity and so like the shadow month of might have wait away given the order to like the monster to like have that capture and affect carry. So like in carry, there might have been a great number of like systems so like in certain like have like the control of the around. So like carry might have the first set of structure calls point like stop all the basic models, but like in certain like eventually carry might have gotten tired and they might have lost some channel at the end of that point might have captured and affected by like the basic models might have been what might have happened. So that league might have the game support. Then other different like post models might have maybe drop carry that according to like the comment or that the shadow monster like and different like those basic models might have from like the 350 second day like they might have all from carry to where like have to like allocation where like shadow monster might have been which might have been still at like the round of that me remember so like the shadow monster that way might have got carried on the way on there to it where the shadow monster was in like the round of talking might have been what might happen and like the same situation in which like will was like put into that and like will was trapped in like the paraglide like that situation where like that thing was put into that will not getting compensation by like the phases monster and in a similar situation carriers will might have been put into and galaxies like with like no one might have been might have thrown up without realizing like Cali situation that comes from that way uh, Cali might have stayed trapped in such a situation and might have been turned into a phase of more of itself. Also definitely might have been the ambition. Also definitely might have been the ambition as well. Towards like the end of like the season two of like going the back that like by 11 of like dancing in that snowball dancing with like Mike in that building that back that Shadow Mountain was able to even with like the great cave close like that Shadow Mountain was able to like safely track down there are exactly 11 blocks in the real world. While the Sharamutar was in the value, it might have been solely due to that. During that time, like the Sharamutar was likely also controlling that the face the humanoid monster, which might have been that the parallel version of that 11. So that might be the impression that is sitting on that it relates things like exactly like the building in like the real world like the same building in like the parallel world as well. Like so like the humans in like the real world like the parallel versions like of those humans might not have been like it was stuck at one point in like the bad word as a might was again might have been like the fan version of Purana that experiment on like the bad version element to maybe like open up the gate myself, considering that this like whole multiple dimensions like opening up and the gate opening up and spreading into like the barrier and basically at that point I'm also conducting that while like the gate has opened like I'm doing like unlike in the case of like 11 like the rainbow like I'm looking like the bad version of 11 might not only instantly got might have been a considered environment might have been a creation of state was not like tapping into like the bandwidth at that point from which kind of at that point or the gate might have been might have happened straight away 11 even though the bandwidth of 11 might have had the of that key which you might have only might have only got out them but 5 was great number of that cases and I'm looking at they might have straight away that maybe eliminated that on of example that they might have totally that maybe at that point that the bad version of the one might have used the chip about that might like stop and that the photo create of that the humanoid numbers and they might have only seen potential in like the bad version of the one so that they might have that big for like the bad version of the one and might have captured and might have currently like integrated that of that spring like the past letter that thing that way like the bad version of the one might have from might have stayed from there and might have with like the elements of like the most of like spreading through like the value version of like uh, 11 and basically the value of 11 might have turned into a face with most of person as well might have been more than element like that face with most of humanoid most of might have been also able to use like the that telekinesis powers of that the value version of 11 as well might have been what that happened so like that way like that face with humanoid most of might have instantly became that value of like the remaining the face most of might have been what might have happened and like basically the shadow monster might have taken control of like that bad version of that element cases that might have been what might have happened. So but trying like in the fundamental premise but putting like the bad version of that event that in like the past like person that might have been possibly turned and run into like a famous similar note that might have been what might have happened is a new I think and that way at that point that you have made like the bad version of the event might have lost like like pelican spout on that why once like that transformation happened and once like bad version of the event turned into like a famous monster that the pelican is as well as maybe decorated but also as well might have been lost but like the access to net the dark void. That power number that might have still been very much certainly not open able to like and like eventually it might have been like the shadow monster like eventually once that might have been ramping its through like the bandwidth and might have been taking control more and more of that also like caves of monsters like unbroken that at that point that was eventually once that it might have also taken control of like the caves of monster so humanoid monster it might have been like the balance processing like that powerful like active method as well. Like at that point, I'm like the shadow method on controlling that to this month of that shadow method might have realized about like if now having access to like power like access to like the dark world and being able to like get anyone one. So this might be the reason for like this might be the reason for that when that 11 had when was left trapped in like the parallel world and that basically 11 will have been able to like stay trapped in like the parallel world for so long without getting captured. Yet like once as soon as like 11 entered like the dark world and for like will like basically as soon as that happened like we would have created as well that will getting captured by one of like the biggest like happened might have been totally to just waiting because like the shadow monster might be always having to check that shapes on top of might have been like the bad version of and like the shadow monster might be always having access to like the dark world space like the belief that very much. So like whenever anyone access like the dark world like everything that whatever that person does in that circuit for like the dark world or whatever that person does in like the dark world for that will be like only visible for like the shadow monster might be the case that might be worrying. So like we have still into my book into the ambition that like even after like 11 has split up with like carry like and after like making it say like the round of thousand to like say might like at that point that making it to like round of thousand like 11 might have actually once again in the like the start with and might have search for like the percent location of might and might have found out that like even to like the whole uh top um top suite during then that during then like event might have been and might have and also might have been in that room covered with the all those great number like sheet that leads to hide like to have will not be able to like find out like the location but like I'm supposed to like 11 like location detecting like dark world access powers like 11 might have like different traffic like going on and that way that might be how like will might have made it been even made able to like make it like when some might have been one happen and the thing that like 11 put like sense like and the thing that exactly like which like event might have sent through since like event might have sent that through like the dark void like the shadow of the first like might have been like since that from the event. Definitely my consideration. So that might be how that maybe like the shadow of the even if such a situation might have figured out where exactly Will was definitely Will was left in is definitely my theory impression. So like my theory impression right now that actually goes back and that might be how that 11 might have found out that might that less will form and not able to show up the aspect that will form in time. Like I'm different yeah like for like the shadow monster like and then it might have been through like the shadow monster for the things that the power to add the like the dark word so like the control of like the humanoid takes a small thing might have been that naturally that transform state of that evaluation of event that they might have been that how that different that when like the shadow monster might have so been that searches for like build might have been what happened like so that the shadow monster post that so it's like control over like that so much of might have given like the command to that is much of it kind of like the to search for will in like the last word and the shadow monster at that point that might have figured out where Jill exactly was that like will during that time was left and like definitely might have been the so like this might be how like the shadow monster might have been detailed left point with so many friends and that takes monster towards that this start like now towards like this one back then certainly what might have happened but things might be different. And it might have been like back then that the phone of like Bill Stone bringing back then while Bill was in this like kind of state and that those and Mike and Watson was asking Bill Gates and then that communicated with like towards them that in the fabric and basically telling the communicator then using the mouse for network so like during that time like that phone ringing at like Bill Stone might have been actually in actuality might have reached like the shadow of the in like the car world already having made it right on top of like Bill Stone in like the car world that means might have been doing and like that up on top of like the shadow of what left there might have been might have been the side effect of that. Exactly like oh, can make another stuff affect like light and that uh, might have been such an effect that like the ringing of like perform during that time like will not happening. Might have been that definitely might be body temperature. So like this might be the reason for like towards like the end of like season two of like the stranger thing that while element along with like Mike was like dancing and like that snowball building like the face of monster I mean like the sound of monster being able to like precisely itself like the location of that where element was during that exact time might have been process manual like once again that the shadow of like okay that ordering like the monster to access the dark void and stack to search for like element and to go and select different location and that might be how like the shadow of had shown up that right on like that exact location of like the snowball building yet in that the panel was back then definitely might be the intention right now. So like the lead my good impression and like that way like the shadow monster might have so they brought like Cali towards like the shadow monster might have like taken control of like Cali and might have then like created like caves in like the town of Hawkins in that an extremely stealthy location like deep underground locations in that the like the battle world like and spend like maybe like the shadow monster might have done a deep use hole in like the town of Hawkins in like the battle world and might have that created like often use things like by taking control of carry like might have instead of might have used like carries like so the power to like create portals from that deep underground and so like that after that creating that gate like from that the shaman of the might have straight away send out like humanoid monsters the pillars maybe not like monsters into like the town of Hawkins through the man that you might go to the emperor and maybe I'm different that so like episode maybe it's being only right now that like the shadow monster might have finally bottom carry in like the shadow months of like percent and control so like implement that it might be right now itself that I'm looking at shadow while that might and others work that watching like the movie that I'm feeling maybe it might be during that exact time that like in the past where like the shadow months of might have that the whole fight there and basically that was the whole fight there and might have while taking full control over that carry might have used that really make carry list of superpowers and might have created like the type of that pair that in that another area in that parallel was connecting to that real world. That make my continuity. So like that way, like I'm like the great army of like the safest monsters under like the control of like the shadow monster might have straight away spread might have like rushed out of like that gate and might have that might have been the reason for like the black current power state, like starting from that node to like this to basically spreading all throughout like the town of that it might have improved due to that whole underground like that underground from that underground location like beneath the mall like the all this like great number of like dark like mountains as well as full nerd mountains like running throughout and spreading throughout like the town of Hawkins right now because I believe the reason for like what seems like from that like the town of starting from the more like usually using like spreading as like power law like spreading through like the okay maybe having to the might be the age technique very so yes so like definitely very interesting right now for like sort of like elements but like the data model like the fact that we like control grid like right now coming and like and this point like so certainly for my very impressive for like for that to happen like the reason might be like because of like the challenge almost likely having been preparing for a while and this considering that need most likely in the third remember like it might have been so challenge that like I'm looking that the shadow monster might have that have pushed that like create like a bunch of like multiple tiers like underground tiers at like locations all across like the town of the like the band but where like absolutely no one will be finding out about the tier and they view that way the shadow monster might have totally control like and might have started like each of those fails like since like the shadow monster that way through Tiani might have created multiple types of course like the town for example different lands so like the spreading of like the vines and like the creation like all that might have happened without much maybe the government's like great like also like about the that different so like a bunch of multiple hub as well might have been created. It's definitely might have been created. So like the hub creation might have been only just now it's definitely my considering. So that this might be the reason as well for like that stuff like shadow particles of like the shadow monster right now coming at us. It's definitely my consider range. So like this time but like I'm going to spend definitely the shadow monster will be more using all that dust elements of like the shadow monster that came alive right now. To take once again take control of will that definitely won't be what like the shadow monster is right now doing like I'm doing right now for all that stuff element right now flying towards like exactly towards like the house where like all the food and element isn't and I'm looking like that first element like entering through like the window of that element where like number one the door being almost closed and the learner would be like maybe sleeping acting up that and basically like delivering that particular the shadow of the like entering through the window and like focusing element and taking control of next element just like maybe the scenario that I'm able to look at. So that way maybe so related to like element being asleep like and like element not realizing about like the incoming shadow monster dust particles and that way let the dust particles that so element like nostrils like basically bring and taking control of that element. This like this kind of like scenario that I'm and yet like I'm sitting like need for like survive because like I'm sitting like even at that point like being controlled by like the shadow monster and basically eleven straight away. And I'm looking for like maybe for like two possibilities that maybe like eleven at that point through like the control of the shadow monster like eleven at that point that maybe destroying that room of like eleven and like running out of the home that proper but to be waking up in a shocked manner and to be that opening the door and to find that the a good portion of that room for an 11 14 minutes like the one that is now where I'm doing and that way like the elements are like totally taking control of 11 and from 11 towards like the location where like the gate to like the fan word and check the multiple gates that might have still be been created in like multiple locations like so like the town of I think by now like in one of those gates one of those gates like into like even entering into like the into like the parallel world of like one possible scenario that I'm like or like the other possible scenario that I'm interested in so like even at that point after like the shadow from the taking control of 11 I'm in scenario to be like made 11 at that point is like I listen 11 like so the power towards like the wall towards like one of like the walls of like the house to touch as good picture and they'll be straight away creating a tire and they'll be straight away into like the parallel it's like the other possible scenario that I'm able to create and that will be so like I'm looking for like my brain for me pick up for waiting for like a for best like see like both my as well as like look at like having girlfriends and especially with like maxing like someone but when they don't want us to be just like something that ending up becoming like little girlfriend like that all that would be like they don't seem trading for like something so like and something like even seeing them just like their girlfriend and all that like something like that would be really feeling like making the feel down and to totally avoid all that like everything like to get so might be like might have been the sole reason for like something going off for like a whole month during like the vacation for camp. Might have been what happened with the might have been the reason. So like considering that was like us running back like definitely initially that jump bring that even with like with the government definitely bring that up with surprise for like that might end again 23 for still able that scene was still with like matching at the girlfriend that's still different things initially definitely for a while that things not going smoothly at all between like Dustin and again definitely due to like Dustin keep on having that jealousy towards like Mike like and like Dustin deep down we also having that so to a certain extent would be like will be having a bit of a rage towards like Martin is like the thing is because definitely my friend because like was something like it might not only felt that like as is like maybe as it's like as it's like maybe matching having like consciously to like so they ignore like something feelings towards like matching and like by accepting this would be along the line like the things might have thought of to that much great extent because of the element of the because like from the point of view that I think like it was like Dustin that in like the very beginning had taken all the initiative that go up to and like so only towards like matching and everything. So like initially it was like a friendship was actually probably between like Dustin and matching later thing so that Dustin might have only felt that betrayed by that matching while that during that snowball dance that matching had probably accepted to dance with like Lucas instead of like Dustin and since then like I'm still talking really later on like matching and Lucas might have ended up in that their relationship with as well just the not very much so like at that point after Lambert like it might have been too much for like the Dustin to like kind of certainly might have been very much so like from that point on like Dustin might have been patiently waiting for like the vacation so that take a time out and basically to get himself triggered that basically and stay away from that yeah, for like certain day. Might have been along the lines that the thing might have only felt so like the right now returning back to like again like I'm still like things initially not going to mostly so it's like for the things like the scenario that I'm looking for because like on the liberating like the sense like even though the might get only trying to hide it like that jealousy of like the things towards like the and might like eventually like pick up ending up becoming part of his favorite and because like maybe look eventually falling off something on like directly and all that. But also like and I'm preferring maybe for like even a fight between like again that's been happening. But still I'm like eventually doesn't totally sorting them out. And also the very so that is sitting on this for like that particular like the shadow muscle like basically would have by now taken control of that element. So like like those can as well as element might be in like the person might be under like the control of like the shadow the method again so like without realizing anything about like candy or like I'm looking like eventually like might handle that journey eventually to like say element like them eventually finding out about like yeah, like things of group 11 like upper brain the same 11 like things of scenario that so like on the point that one they be like finally struggling the brain to like finally putting in that really challenge at that point is when I'm different like finally like I'm different like that's not when I'm different like would be like influentially ending that for scenario initially leading to that person and can eventually ending up being in that relationship like thing the scenario that I was saying and definitely I'm still thinking about my very that like naturally can might definitely be man might definitely might be very so definitely like I'm only putting like doesn't know from even finding out about that as like even at that point that's just like thing scenario that I'm thinking about the like animal doing also definitely might be very interesting right now as for like this time aspect how Dustin might have lost his speed might have been spent during that one of that like Dustin had spent might have spent at like camp it might be doing better that like Dustin might have lost his speed definitely might be very interesting. Okay, so like definitely might be very interesting right now as for like the multiple shops in like Hawkins that seeing the sort of definitely telling how that at least 5 different oftentimes close like so the like this will be all connected to the like strategy, realistic strategies and like the move that like the shadow monster will be making. And find out like the shadow monster might have put that as to stealth over like the past year might have created like a vast underground network under like the town of Hawkins of like the upside down someone like made like upside down path like so that has to stealth like I'm saying like after like uh taking control of access the control method mentioned like the like the person like the shadow monster might have like already taken control of that carry definitely using carry like by taking control of carry and by sourcing carries like very good superpowers like and then the shadow master and the different like maybe it might have been way back since maybe like towards like things like maybe it might be around like the mid like the past year something like but maybe it might be lower than that like the shadow master might have got that might have captured and taken control of the carry and might have started off it like move and might have started like creating own like create number lab around hubs as well as like just underground upside down and means like network or extending a project that affects around by now especially might have been and so like the process still might not be fully complete like it might have been only recently that like the building of like the hub in like the area next to where like that dust particle of the shadow metal was like lying in might have been completed that it might be because of that like that it might be only just now that that stuff like the particle of the shadow metal has changed and like it definitely might have been very unconscious and then the flipping like those particles might have entered elements in that body while element might have been shaped during like the night about which that element might not be aware of. So like those particles might be that they must also affect slowly running free element that process might have slowly start only to begin right now. Definitely also might be the range. And for like will for being feeling uneasy like a still those are like at this time like being would be only safe and like the shadow monsters target won't be at all with definitely might be in the range. So definitely my very impressive that like so exactly like how like while watching like the movie that my can different watching like the movie the rocket like how things that basically control that was seen to be the Pendathlon like these power outage might have been happening for a great while now or like maybe from like the middle of like the previous year so then like I'm to like the shadow monster might have started like me more so like underground of carry and might have definitely creating that underground so it can to the power of creating multiple gates underground with the in like absolute steady and hidden locations and might have been creating like vast underground like in the process of creating vast underground that means like network and stuff like it might be due to like this process and that definitely it might be due to this process and like the maybe dark like most the first most is traveling through that is that means like underground is like that might have been the result reason for like or like it might have been not just like the reason out of is like from the theater like panic, but in that case with the town of something alone that because like this power of it definitely might have been going on for a while. So and definitely like none of them like things like I've seen like 11 like actually closing the gate like since the gate has been read and 11 has closed the gate like they might all be like say assuming that like they are all absolutely safe. So like even if like the power outage might have start happening since like maybe like the middle of the previous year itself. Like I'm looking like as a proper known the others like even though they might have felt uneasy being like the connection of like the power outages to like the big and everything. Yet like they might just really assume that maybe it's just like it like the power outage has absolutely no connection to like the bad word might be or then all might have assumed film length and everything these power outages might have kept on happening and it might have that the frequent power outages might have been what might have resulted in like no matter what business in one starts in that context like I'm saying like the equipment and everything, the electronic equipment and everything that will become a part of like the part of each business that will getting started in like the town of like all of those like electrical gadgets and equipment and everything will be getting destroyed due to like the frequent power outages that leak might be today. This might be the reason for like all these new businesses starting in like starting and floating without much creativity in like the town of uh, happening. Even that happening will be due to the platforms and power outages that which might be also happening in like the town of the for a while since like the house second. The previous year was definitely might also be happening. So like this might be also the reason for like maybe a lot of like people from like Hawkins might have even might have gotten fed up like the extreme frequent power outages that like, they might have moved out of like Hawkins as well. Might have been what might have happened. Definitely might have been so definitely that might be also the reason for like uh, and like people might have like even that was like frequent power outages like going on for like electronic gadgets as well and appliances and everything that might have also resulted in like the decline in like the demand from like the people talking like by to go up to the shops and even buy from devices and appliances but also the demand that coupled with like a lot of people from the living in like the town of Hawkins might have even shifted to towns outside and cities outside that might have left Hawkins definitely due to soil inclusion as well. It's also like leak micronutrient. So like it might be the reason for like the certain situation in like multiple shops and even like the shops of the shop in which like those are the what in it. That's definitely micronutrient in production. So like definitely I'm to be definitely the landscape. Post like right now we're talking about like all this like strange things with like the multiple business like opening and working projects and everything. Like I'm also putting like like this like curiosity about bringing out like created a arising more and more like more intensity within like Nancy, resulting in like eventually working able to like being like Nancy. Eventually able to be like the something what feeling like the Nancy that will be like figuring out as to like what might be going on as to like just in that time like without them on realizing like the shadow month of making it move and like having already built like to a way more great extent of like around upside down maze like tunnels like way more time like the 3 mile radius of like the underground maze like tunnel surrounding that the energy laboratory that like the shadow month of having this bit in like the bar like the use number for into the natural that we concept to the out. So definitely like the scenario that I'm going to go to protection like the reason. Oh, yes, well, I've definitely my particular function right now. So like, the whole thing of like basket right now having a girl on by like the name Susie, like I'm delivering that would be such an absolute like which like I'm going so really to that for nothing being it's feeling extremely insecure of not being able to like have certain like I'm looking like for that it might be due to like nothing insecurity I'm looking like nothing might be totally definitely I'm looking nothing but only like about like having the girlfriend where the name so it definitely might be so like I'm definitely nothing right now probably managing to like and convince all of them that like should be this like girlfriend. So definitely might be the reaction. But like the actuality will be that that it will be like totally like and that might end up just like eventually finding out such that it was a like so that eventually like also like this scenario that I'm going to and my theory and function and that might be at that point that like a little like the fight might even break out that like once like substance will be like finding out that like Mike and Roger has found out that substance was like lying all along about like choosing and maybe I'm looking even at that point like Mike and Roger like probably will be feeling like will be feeling kind of like awkward but like because like I'm looking at the scenario being like Mike and Roger like still even after realizing the truth like them keeping it that from something that like they know the truth uh, on the substance is like the scenario that I'm so like them not saying that to like the net beating on going on about like this like girlfriend Susie that might that like about his like well and all that. So it's like the scenario that I'm looking at until it reaching a point where like I'm looking that maybe like eventually Lucas getting fed up and like Lucas only eventually reaching a point where like Lucas finally might be calling something out on like life and like telling something to like stop and that totally deeply angry Dustin and maybe that taking that and frustrating Dustin to the point that Dustin might react in an extremely angry manner towards like Lucas and like towards such a manner of fight happening or like the other positive that I'm looking for like Mike and others like or like keeping it a secret like for like them once like they will be realizing that like Dustin was like lying about having his girlfriend by the name Susie and all that. So like the scenario for like other positive that I'm and them keeping it alive and they leave them probably going along with like Muslim and they leave as if like they are still convinced that like Muslim have like a girlfriend and usually eventually I'm different like reaching a point where like Muslim is often finding out that like his friends were like his friends knew that like Muslim was like and was like probably totally in that time in front of like Muslim. So like at that point like I'm looking for feelings in the generation out of feeling like all of them having to make fun of that subject this entire time by like putting on that fake act in front of that person might even know that like person of like about like 2 weeks that in that time it's also like some of the that I'm doing and even that has been starting in that particular like insecurity and jealousy and everything like probably spending it out and like taking it out on like his friends and his views that way that still a fight happening between that person and that specifically Lucas like the scenario that I'm Lucas and Max like it would be like against like Lucas and Maxine that Dustin would be taking out most of his like hand and race and testing like the scenario that like, and even though Lucas would be going to under the point maybe as well like the particular that I'm for at that point Lucas going to the absolute maximum Lucas and Maxine going to their absolute maximum to like calm Dustin down and like to give hope to like Dustin that like by telling Dustin that okay that like things would be like swap that out for like cousin as well. Usually like this is like with such a manner because like maybe like with us as well as like might be trying to like calm down and comfort Dustin, but like still all that like not about fluffing out and about like Dustin fully taking off all of it like integrity and like all of them and basically maybe even temporary split as well happening with that Dustin maybe that completely separating from that himself from that again. So like so such a fight is also like an individual scenario that I'm also totally mistake and my personal yet like I'm just getting into me Dustin like for me like finally regretting all that and actually accepting this like mistakes and in that way like something at that point we just try to like make it up for like towards like the machine and then there can and like that way doesn't like like coming back like something for them but like I'm maybe by the like the gang of like Mike and Paul in that probably getting into like some sort of like a trouble kind of like situation. So like at that point I'm just like they will be like such this trouble kind of like a situation maybe at that point with gaining customs that will be ending up showing up and like to be managing like sales. It's like also like any possible among like multiple possible scenarios that would involve with something and my theory is also right. Okay, so like the police my theory and something right now for like that girl who got at like that like free stop with like the number three that girl is definitely had a take on having that outfit but my feelings towards like speed definitely my theory and yet like I'm like unlike in like use case that you are lacking a speed that is trying to like teach feel a lessons like by taking them to work there like basically like even still like think like from that girl's point of view like like the situation might be like unlike in case where like parents are extremely wealthy like like in that case like I feel that that girl who comes along with the experience that I brings out like she might not be at all from like an extremely wealthy background at all definitely my coaching theory and also support definitely she might even have like depth to that payoff as well. It's definitely bunch of like depth as well to that payoff and all that institute as well. It's also definitely my personal ambition. So like even though she might deep down genuinely deeply love Steve, like something that she might be totally insecure about like and might be fearing that if she expert up into Steve for like I'm getting injected by Steve. It's definitely my personal ambition. So like I'm thinking she might be totally keeping it within while only pretending to like help Steve out with like Steve's like attempts to like basically to get like, the customers to like to totally solve what Steve the my personal ambition. When in actuality like I'm like each time like she might be totally laid down hoping that basically all those girls that like, Steve is like white working is like approaching that all of those other girls like for them to like totally reject Steve and like basically each time like each girl will be like rejecting Steve like and like that girl who works with see like each time that she will be like okay feeling overjoyed certain with like she might be totally hiding it from Steve. Might be the actual different situation that leak my good relation. It might be her joy that like from within that like every time that joy and that relief that she might be feeling within every time Steve gets rejected by other that like basically which she would be like expressing through like her like throwing that like line and like number of times that like basically still having getting projected since like joining the work is definitely my point in very unconscious. So like definitely I'm going to bring like eventually I'm definitely throwing that up and still sort of eventually that girl goes up to stage as well as next stage maybe ending up being part of like the whole eventual situation of like the next set of like trouble due to like the shadow of the family and then like the like to the according to my brother in already like a huge extent of like the underground upside on this and up might have been already created like underneath in that approach that underneath in like that underground of like the in the underground of like the town or something like I'm delivering definitely so eventually once that things will be starting like this will happen and like this will probably starting to like, arise and basically and it's like a bunch of attack from that case of monsters which I'm covering up like eventually happening. Case of monsters that are getting unrolled by like the shadow monster and all that like the will be happening like once like situation will be getting in that dangerous like and that point I'm definitely putting that just the whole plot would like speak and that experience of totally ending up becoming part of like that whole journey of like could like stop and bring down like the shadow monster this time as well the attempts of like the what shadow of to like fight like the bad world into like the real world like in the journey to like put and then the same journey to like along with like Mike and the like which I'm going to speak again would be like at that point on finding that out, like by this only through Nancy. Nancy will be like going to like find it out, and that way that Nancy will be passing on that like information, like meeting up with like everybody else, like with Mike and all of them, as well as like especially through Jonathan and Steve and like Papa and all of them, like once again the entire gang like totally joining up. And during that time, like I'm like but leave this the what's with Steve, like I'm trying to exactly like how eventually slowly Maxine had like totally just like Mike and the group like eventually like paying attention to that Maxine, eventually ending up with like Maxine being part of like their group and getting dragged into eventually getting dragged into like their whole confluence of with like the Balbert and like the Shadow Master and like the and everything and similar scenario happening through like which the proof of Steve in like the adventure to Steve down really having like same terms of affection towards like Steve like as well eventually and like to be getting into being part of like following Steve to like point of eventually being ending up being part of like the sport and going up and like that through that it same being a situation which like she the second would be definitely would be along with like Steve during that whole change of situation like and that eventually bring both of them closer to the point where like I'm feeling like it being not blessing that self itself that might eventually like the future would be something of love towards like Steve. And but from that maybe being only at that point that Steve even suddenly realizing that like what he was talking about but in that time was like right beside him in that like in sort of like in the scenario that that way like in that couldn't believe that Steve as well as that so he was to feel that into the other and like her relation like in the scenario that I'm like and my theory and